Hey guys, Ryan here. Today we're going to be installing our cab wall MOLLE kit in our 3rd gen Colorado. This also works in the GMC Canyon. Let's get into it. All right, these are our 2 cab wall MOLLE panels. As you can see, they're split in 2. If you saw our engineering video, you know we did this so it's a little bit easier to maneuver the whole thing when you're in the truck, and it reduces some shipping costs for both of us. And now let's go through the hardware. We have our mounting blocks, our channel nuts, our 5/16 18 hardware, some 1/4 inch hardware for the bottom spacers, and then these are more 1/4 inch hardware to join the 2 panels together, and a bumper. The tools you need for this install are a 3/16 Allen, a 5/32 Allen, as always a trim tool, and in your kit you're going to get this basic Rivnut installation tool. And if you want to make your life a little bit easier, you can get this whole Rivnut gun. We have this listed on our site now. So let's go over the hardware that comes in the kit. You get a 1/4 inch bolt that likes to move around. You get your nut and a washer and a star washer, and then this extra 1/4 20 nylon lock nut that you can use after you're done with the tool to mount whatever you want to your panel. All right, now to assemble the tool, you take your bolt, your washer, your oversized nut, and then your star washer can go on top of that. Then you're going to thread on your Rivnut. There we go, that's everything you need to get started. We're going to be installing this in a fixture that we're using in our warehouse. When you're installing it in your truck, you've just drilled a hole through the paint, and now you have an area that has unprotected seal. You're going to want to use a paint pen or some spray paint, whatever you can, to get in there and try to seal that up. And it's always a good idea to also put some silicone around the Rivnut and before you place it in, and then when you're pushing it through the hole, that should spread around that area and really seal it up to prevent any rust. Now to drive this Rivnut in, you're going to need a 3/8 inch wrench and also a 1/2 inch wrench for the oversized nut. What you're going to do is hold the nut in place and tighten the other bolt. You can always use a ratchet or an impact gun if you want on the drive end, but for this purpose I'm just going to show you can do it with hand tools. And you can see already it's stiffened up. I don't know if you can see on the other side, it's ballooned out. It'll be hard at first, but once you start deforming the material, it'll get easier. I have the advantage of being able to see what's on the other side to see when it's crushed enough, but it should only take a couple turns. It gets to a point where it really doesn't want to move anymore, and I wouldn't go any far past that. Now you just unthread the 1/4 20 bolt that's in there. There we go. Ta-da! All right, on your cab wall, you're going to have 3 of these inserts. You're going to have to pop them out with your trim tool. We use these for our mounting. The clips on these are on either end of the wides of the slot, so if you can get your tool in there. This one's a little dull, so it's hard to get under when it's nice and tight. All right, it's easier to get the hardware started when it's not cramped in the back of the truck, so go ahead and get this all together. We have our bolt, our mounting block, and our channel nut. What you want to do is just tighten it down so it holds itself together. It'll be easier to line in, and then once you have this in the hole, what you're going to do is loosen it. It'll turn that 1/4 turn like that, pull it tight, and with your fingers or with the tool, just tighten it up a little bit, and it'll clamp down on the metal of the bed. And of course, you don't want to forget the washers on these bolts. We have them already on there because that's how we roll. Go. Move on to the next side. The next step would be to hang this in the truck and mark your holes where you're going to drill out for your Rivnuts. They're down at the bottom. It's easier to do this once it's all installed on the truck and locked together. That way you know your holes are going to be pretty much dead on. Once you have it all the way installed, you'll have to take it off, drill the holes out, install the Rivnuts, and then put it all back on again. We fortunately, since we had development on this truck, the Rivnuts are already installed, so we're just going to push forward, get it installed, and we'll cut away to us doing that earlier on. All right, you also want to install this bumper before you mount the panel. It's easier to do when it's off the truck, is you take the bumper and our push nut and install it on this second panel. This is a passenger side with a jog. This just keeps it from rattling around too much when you have it loaded up. All right, the first step will be to put up the driver's side cab wall. There we go. Now we'll just back these off like a quarter turn until the channel nut drops into place, and we can pull these back. Now working on the passenger side, same as before. Just make sure you get the jog behind your panel you just installed. And be sure to drop everything. That's always helpful. This side you don't want to crank down all the way, just so you can move it to line it up with the other panel down here. So I'll get that hardware and join them together. All right, line them up just like this and put the bolt in. You may have noticed that these panels look like they have a pretty big gap between them. Part of that is just because of how it's hanging. These bolts holes are oversized. We know that trying to line up a Rivnut when you're drilling by hand is pretty difficult. So we gave it a lot more room up here so you can move the whole panel around to hopefully account for any mistakes at the bottom. So it's definitely going to want to start by installing those, and then you can get this as close as possible, make it look good, and tighten down the top. Now at this point, once you have both of these tightened, you would take a Sharpie or a center punch and mark where you're going to want to drill the holes. So again, there's three. There's one here, one on the driver's side, and one on the passenger side. Like we mentioned before, these are already installed on our truck. And here's a video of Matt drilling the holes and installing the Rivnuts on our prototype.
So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mark out these lower locations for a rivet nut and then install those so that the panel can't swing at all.
Once you have all that installed, we'll go ahead and put these 1/4 bolts in the bottom with our spacers. The spacers can be a little difficult because it's hard to get your fingers behind there, but I have faith in you. You may find that you have to lift the panel up. Again, that's that extra wiggle room that we have in there. So. All right, last one. Once everything's installed and you're holding the panel where you want it to be, you can start tightening down the bolts, just like every other product. Everything, it's best to put it all together loose and then make sure the all fits right and tighten it all down. All right, with that, we've finished the install. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Feel free to reach out to us. Have a good one.